Well, hello and welcome to the Practitioner Podcast, a podcast from us at Renaissance, a network of missional practitioners and micro churches in the greater Boston area. Every episode of this podcast, we talk about themes around living on mission and living in microchurch community. Our conversations are practical, touching on the realities of everyday, ordinary people. This is because our mission is all about cultivating beautiful kingdom people embedded in the everyday stuff of life. As you may have noticed, this is not Christine Lee, who typically is the main host of this podcast. It's me, Drew Thurman. She's currently traveling again and taking some time off, so I'm hosting solo this time. But I'm not alone on this episode because I am joined by Mr. Jace Rasche. How's it going, Jace?
Good. How's it going? Glad to be on.
It's really good. This feels like old times. For those
Yeah.
of you who may not be familiar, we had a previous podcast as a part of our network called the Dream, Create, Enjoy podcast, which Jace and I recorded together all the time. So this feels like
Yeah.
old times.
Yeah, I
Excited.
think Fab was joking when Fab was on, he was joking about being kicked off the
He was-
podcast before. I've been kicked off like 3 times now, so I've got him beat for sure.
You have. It's big touch and go. So real quick,
Glad to be back though.
we're going to be talking a lot about your story and a little bit about who you are. But rather than me give an introduction to who you are, why don't you give us a quick background of who you are, what you do for Renaissance?
Um, yeah, so I'm Jace. I work for Renaissance. I also manage Come and Good Co., our coffee shop. Uh, Married to Katie, 3 kids, 7, 5, and 1. We moved here with the Thurmans. Gosh, was that 8 years ago now? 7.5 years ago?
7.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Um, yeah, and so I've been doing this ever since. Most of what I mean, I joke with you all the time. My title with Renaissance has changed at least 10 times in the past 7 years, but I do a lot of the operations, the back end stuff, administrative, finances, budget, and then whatever else needs to be done. So pick up different things here and there, but that's kind of been my thing. And then hospitality is also another thing that I've um, kind of you probably see me grilling or cooking at some event that we've had and something like that. So spent a lot of time that before I did this, I worked for Young Life, so I was doing youth ministry for about 7 years. And I do actually have a finance degree from Indiana. That's why I got tasked with leading Come and Good Co. So I have the business degree. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, yep. Jason knows my eyes glaze over if I have to stare at Excel spreadsheets for more than 30
Yeah.
minutes at a time. So thankful for him on
No.
that. Well, you were kidding around about getting kicked off the podcast. Another previous episode, Christine and I, there is a riff on
Oh
our
yeah.
team all about, we argue about food all the time on our team thread. We had like a running joke for a while about Chili's versus Applebee's. It was like two of us on one side of that debate, two of us on the other. But you caught some strays in the podcast about not
I
being.
did. I did.
So I want to give you a chance to defend yourself and tell us, as you believe yourself to be a self-described
Listen,
foodie, what's your
I
go-to meal?
I mean, I will go to my grave saying Applebee's boneless wings are better than any other boneless wings. I don't care what you guys say on this podcast. It doesn't make it not true. Um, I love to grill, so I love any kind of food on the grill. Um, Sweet potato fries, a good salad I actually enjoy these days. I think that's just part of getting older and your
Right,
digestive
something you're getting
system
older, time of year.
not changing. But yeah, so I mean, anytime I go out to a restaurant, I try to eat some, unless it's Applebee's boneless wings. Those are, I have to get those. But otherwise, I'm trying to get something that I don't feel like I can cook as good at home as typically. So a lot of times when I go out, I will look to order seafood because I don't really cook seafood at home. I like cooking steaks and chicken and pork and all that good stuff when I'm here. But when we're out and about, a good burger or a good fish and chips. That's probably my go-to. Uh, and if I'm at a nicer restaurant, I'll get their nice seafood
Yeah.
fish option, whatever that is. But
Do you have a favorite restaurant so far in your time in Boston?
um, there's not a shortage of good places to eat. My favorite um is probably Gustazo, which is Cuban food here on Moody Street in Waltham. It's so good. The croquetas are just Oh, I could eat those ham croquetas all day long. So that's probably the best, uh, like close by, that's still like accessible food that I have around here. So that'd be my go-to. What about
Yes.
you? What did you say?
I don't think I've ever said that on this podcast. No, I would agree. I mean, I always tell people Gustav's is maybe one of the best meals I've ever had in Boston.
Yeah.
And the chef's like what, James Beard
Yeah.
finalist or something.
I
Yeah,
mean, so
yeah,
good.
it's awesome. So yeah, I don't think you could go wrong with that. And there's the amount of like awesome Italian food is
I
just
mean, yeah, Italian's probably my favorite. That's my favorite cuisine. But
you really can't go wrong. But
gnocchi, oh, a good gnocchi dish. Mm,
yeah.
it's good.
Well, this segues this really well, and it's great that you were talking about hospitality because it is something that you're really good at. You and Katie together have done so much hosting for Renaissance stuff, both from a microchurch level and from a network perspective over the years. And we typically on these shows go back and forth of who's kind of bringing the theme. We were kind of letting you bring this theme today, and as we were talking through it, the topic arose of what does it look like to be missional and show hospitality as an introvert, which
Yes.
anybody who's spent time with you as well, you're pretty open and honest about the fact that you're introverted and that while you're social, you need a lot of time to yourself. And I think that's just going to be something really relatable to a lot of people that are going to be listening to this. So maybe define for us a little bit about why you were cool talking about that, and
Yeah.
why this is the topic that we're kind of platforming you on.
Well, I think it's important too, because I think it's one of those things, we say all the time, the priesthood of all believers, that this is for everybody. Everybody has a part to play. And so I think it's easier sometimes to see the part you have to play when you're an extrovert, because it makes sense in terms of how do I reach my neighbors. When you're an introvert, sometimes that can be a little bit scary or daunting or harder. And I wouldn't say I'm a full-on introvert. I like to say I'm an extroverted introvert. I do like people. My sweet spot's like a small group setting. Maybe playing a board game or a few people around a fire pit. Once it gets above like that 6 to 8 people range, that's where I start to get uncomfortable or try and find one or two people at the party that I can just kind of settle down with. But I do like um, I like people. I like being around people. It just drains me, and I need some alone time afterwards. And so it's not that I don't enjoy people. I do, most people. But it's just that it drains me and I need to kind of reset. And I think it's important for everybody. I think one of the things that I have had to come to grips with, um, I mean, I was doing Young Life, so I was having to be up front and like on stages and in front of people a lot too. So part of it's just a learned skill. You learn how to do that. I can fake being extroverted pretty well, but um, I think it's the idea that everything that I want to use all that I have, and God calls us to share this life with people and be in community. We're not supposed to do this alone. And so while I'm introverted, and that's just refers to where I feel drained, that doesn't mean that I'm shouldn't be around people or that's just as vital. And I think it brings a different value set to people too in terms of hospitality. So yeah, so I think it plays out a lot of different ways, but I think that the biggest one is that I'm never the one that's going to be the one that to make the introduction. I can do it. I've learned how to do it. That's just not where I'm most comfortable in being that kind of extroverted, the first one to reach out and do something. And so, uh, yeah, so I think that the one of the other things that I've learned through this is that what's been helpful for me, at least, is having um, a reason to be doing something. It helps make me more comfortable. So if that whatever a club, when I was doing Young Life, I was the football coach, and so it was easier for me to be around kids, and because I had a reason to be talking to them about something else, and then it was natural transition into something else. And so what that looks like for me now is, you know, whether it's joining a group or playing basketball with some guys or taking the dog, walking the dog around the street or being with the kids at the playground, is there's always another lead in or another thing that I can kind of help me feel comfortable in those settings, and a reason for me to be interacting with someone. I'm never, like I said, I know how I feel a lot of times. I want to be left alone, so I then project that onto other people, and I try to leave them alone as well. So I'm never going to be the one to initiate conversation for the most part, um, unless there's a reason to be having a conversation. So if our
Yeah,
kids are there playing together, then it's a lot easier for me. Oh, well, how old's your kid? And it kind of breaks the ice and helps me. So I've learned those things about myself, and I've make sure that I have certain things with me to help um, when I'm in those situations, if that makes sense.
that's awesome. Yeah, I love you're giving us a lot of information. I think we're going to track back on some of these themes. This is going to be awesome. And I should just say, kind of at the top end of some of these questions we're going to break through, I'm going to be doing lots of just asking questions because I am the complete opposite. I am total extrovert.
Yep.
I love meeting new people. Finding out new things about folks is like gives me life. I love meeting my neighbors and helping get catalyze things. I often feel like one of the one of my roles, both as a neighbor and as a friend, I do this for common good a lot. I do this in our network a lot, is just being the person willing to risk and say, you know what, I can catalyze people to this. Let's do it. Everybody wants to do it. They're just waiting for someone to kind of get the ball rolling. And so I'm the opposite of this. And I also, and this is what I really want us to get into a little bit of you telling your story. Um, I grew up moving around a lot, so sometimes I often wonder like how much of am I just like a true extrovert, and how much of it has just been a learned skill. We moved around every few years, and I was constantly starting over. And so whether it's kind of like a sink or swim sort of deal. One of the easy ways to survive as you're constantly moving around is to learn how to get to know people, to adapt to your situations, to understand your context. And so when we were moving here, like I know we both were going through our own journeys. For me, it was all exciting. I spent my whole life moving around and starting over, and I think it was took you for a little bit of time to get your feet underneath you. And I also with that, I want us to talk it through again. I think typically folks like myself are the ones that get categorized as truly missional people, who are the ones who are the most gifted at hospitality and mission, which is not true. I think if there's anything I've learned in this journey of walking alongside you and seeing our network is that I love what you said about the priesthood of all believers. A number of different personality types can be used in their own way. God has specific skills that he's wanting to get. So I would just love for you to like describe for us the journey you've been on of debunking this myth for yourself of
Yeah.
like only extroverted go-getters are the missional hospitable people. And then maybe with that, think through what like the last 7 and 8 years moving away from a place you knew really well in southern Indiana, coming to a brand new city and working through that. Describe for us all of that journey because I think it'll probably be really relatable to people when they think about their own practitioner journey.
Yeah. Um, so I think the hardest part when we moved, 7.5 years ago, is I was doing ministry in the same place where I grew up. So I'd spent 25 of my 30 years in the same town. Um, and so I had and again, the opposite of Drew, I had very deep relationships with people. I had known some people my whole life for, 10, 15 years. And so it's a different level. I don't think I even realized how introverted I was until we moved here, just because it was the first time, like, I already knew everyone. There weren't that many new people. And so new people didn't scare me as much because I had a wide swath of people that I knew, and I had too many relationships already that I couldn't even keep up with, of all people I knew. And so, I think it made meeting new people a little bit, it wasn't a thing that I was actively doing because I already had so many relationships that went back so far. And so I think being removed from that and coming here was a little disorienting, and trying to, well, one is just making friends as adults is harder anyways, but, and then two, just being in a new place with no family nearby, and trying to navigate what that's like, I think was, yeah, disorienting is the best word, but just challenging in a lot of ways. And then something I knew inherently, but I think moving here kind of made it more reality of just like, um, even when I was leading with Young Life and we would have volunteer leaders that would, reach out to high school kids. So we'd have some very quiet ones and some very extroverted ones. And it was, you'd see all the kids flock to the popular one or the one that was the most outgoing or the most extroverted. But what I noticed through my 7 years of doing Young Life was that the really quiet leaders or the more introverted ones always seemed to have a smaller group of people around them, but those relationships always were so much closer and tighter and deeper in some ways. And so that was an observation I had made, and knew that. And so I think that that's one of the things. So I knew that conceptually, but once we moved here, I think that became more of a reality of like, I'm never going to have like a ton of relationships, and it's going to take me longer than it takes someone else. And that's okay. We're going to go at different paces, but I'm also offering something different than what an extrovert is in terms of a relationship. I can sit there and listen for a long time without feeling the need to talk, or we can have deeper conversations, or we can go, um, I'm, it's like a slow burn, in terms of like a relationship. We're going to be friends, and we're going to be friends for a while, and it's going to go deep. And it's, because once you become that in that circle, you become a comfortable person for me. And I want to spend more time with those people because I'm introverted. I still like people. I want to be around people, but um, I don't add as many people to that circle as fast as what an extrovert would do. And so I think recognizing the value in that and not trying to compare yourself to what you see someone else doing, is really important, and just leveraging different strengths. I think one of the best things we did early on when we moved here is, um, and just the different role, like if you see me a lot of times, in terms of hospitality, I'll be the one grilling or I'll be the one doing the stuff behind the scenes. Um, and I like to think of it as like that's my contribution to the entire environment. Like we would have parties and Drew would be over there chatting it up with neighbors while I'm in the background getting plates and grilling and getting and providing the stuff necessary to make that happen. So a lot of times I view that as my role. Not that that's the only role, but is setting the stage and doing a lot of the work so that um, that those interactions are happening. I'm fostering that environment, creating that environment where those connections can happen, even if they're not always with me. And and it's not. I'm not going to be. I'm much more likely to be the person that I'm going to make one connection when I'm at a thing with one person, but I'm going to sit there and I'm going to talk to them for a long time, and then I'm going to follow up with them the next week. you know, we've been at things and Drew's like, I met so and so and so and so and so and so. And I was like, I don't even know who all these people are. Like, I'm glad somebody talked to them because I don't have the bandwidth to talk to 8 different people that I didn't know before. But that one person that I connected with and we hit it off, like, I'm going to go deeper and follow up with them. And I think it's just providing a different thing. Um, and like both are needed. It's not like one's better than the other. I think that that's the key to realize is to stop comparing, and then also to stop trying to think that it has to look the same or that there's a certain number of relationships. I think what God calls us to is community, with other people, and I think for extroverts, that circle's a lot bigger, and for introverts, the circle might be a lot smaller. That doesn't mean there's not other people in the circle. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have a circle of people. We can't just hide and be a hermit our whole lives. And so I think it's trying to balance the two. Uh, I think is the biggest one. And the honestly the biggest. I know this is probably jumping ahead, but the biggest struggle I think for me, and I would say is probably a lot of introverts feel this way when you're trying to live missionally, you're trying to be hospitable to people, is um, battling the constant tension of I know this is what I'm called to do, um, and also at the same time, like, do I like trying to sift out, do I need me time right now? Do I need to just not be around people? Or is this just me avoiding because I know it's going to be uncomfortable? Because I think a lot of times God asks us to step into uncomfortable things, whether you're introverted or extroverted. It might look different. The uncomfortable thing for an extrovert might be spending some time in solitude in silence. I mean, that might be the uncomfortable thing that's needed for you. But I think that's the hardest part for me is figuring out when am I just being selfish and skirting my what I feel like God's calling me to do, and when am I actually do I need to actually spend time for myself because I've been around people too much? So I think my default is always, you know, I would rather not be in the big group setting. But a lot of times it's for me it's similar to like going to the gym. I'm never excited to go to the gym, but I'm always really glad that I went when I'm done at the gym. And I think for a lot of times, like being around people is like that for me. Is I'm never excited beforehand. I'm always excited when someone cancels. You can always cancel a meeting with me, and you're not going to offend me. I'll be excited. But it's one of those things where it's like when I'm with someone and then I come home, it's like, no, that was really good. Like I'm really glad I did that, or I went to that social and we talked. And it's just that initial barrier of like I know I'm going to be uncomfortable in the first 5 minutes, but once I get past that, I'm fine, and I can, Drew see me. I can chat with people. I can talk with people. I can do the whole thing, and I enjoy it. But it's just that initial barrier that I think a lot of times I have to get over.
I mean, the fact that I mean, if anyone was questioning whether or not you were an introvert, the fact that you compared social settings to going to the gym, I think confirms for people, that is, I have never had that thought. So I'm just, again, I'm learning. This is great hearing from another perspective. And I think, again, I think this is going to be really relatable for a lot of people who maybe have disqualified themselves or said, there's something wrong with me. It's like, no, like, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and I love some of the different things you're pointing out. The way that we, so often, it's great that we link arm in arm with people who are gifted in ways that we aren't, because together we actually create better, hospitable environments. I think about that all the time. There's times when, you know, even in micro churches that we've helped start together, I'm always thinking about who can I invite? How can we stretch? How can we push? And I think you and Katie are always really good about thinking, how do we care for the people that you've already gotten around the table in my living room?
Mhm.
And I think that's a good tension, a healthy tension to live into. Both of those things are valid, but with one or the other without balance is really really unhelpful. You kind of led us there in the last thing you were talking about there, but I'd love maybe to expand upon it, getting into the weeds here a little bit.
Mhm.
You talked about one of your challenges, just that initial like breaking through, going ahead and doing it even if it's uncomfortable. Is there some other challenges you can think of when it's meant to, like, as you've learned to be missional, not just learning to be less introverted or just own that, but how when you think about being missional, about showing hospitality, what have been some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome, and where have you had to work the most to grow in this journey?
I mean, that's definitely the biggest one is just putting myself out there. And I think conceptually, I think what keeps me going is just that conceptually, I know that everyone craves community and everyone is looking for someone else to connect with. Loneliness is at an all-time high. And so I think um, that's one of those things when I'm like, I don't really want to do this thing, or like a lot of times I get in my head of like, oh, they don't really want to talk to me, or there's nothing I can, of just reminding myself of like just being a friendly face and someone that they can go to is valid and is important. So I think the biggest challenge is just getting over that initial decision to do the thing or go to the thing. And then beyond that, I think it's of just making sure. Well, and then I also said too, the challenge of not just spending all your time alone, of putting yourself in situations where you're going to have to be around people. Now that happens naturally for me a lot anyways, but also just, you know, between work and other, all the stuff that we have planned already for me, I don't really have to do as much, but even just like being intentional about going in the neighborhood. And you said you like to get to know your neighbors. I like to get to know my neighbors too, but for me, I might have to see them outside 5 times before I'll, break the ice and say hi. It's not going to happen the first time. And so I think consistency is key, and just like committing to doing a certain thing or a certain thing, being in a certain place or doing a certain thing with a group of people over time so that I'm seeing the same people is really helpful. And I think that the challenge, another challenge too, is just being is doing that instead of it would be easy to just kind of float in and float out of a lot of different spaces, and then you never really have to engage on a deep level. And so I think the challenge is to continually to push myself uh, towards those deeper relationships. And then, um, you know, I'd rather get my PJs on and just cozy up and in my comfy clothes and watch TV by myself at night. That would be my preferred thing. But knowing that that's not healthy to do that all the time, like, inviting people over for dinner or hosting things at the house. A lot of times we plan those because I know if I wouldn't plan them in advance, that those things wouldn't naturally happen anyways. And so it's a way for me to not let myself be too comfortable with um, that alone time and to continually put myself out there because I am always amazed at like I said I do genuinely enjoy it after the fact, and so I think the challenge a lot of times is more mental for me of knowing that this is what I feel. I know that we're meant for community. I know that this is what God is calling me to, and it's just my own fears and my own uncomfortableness that's getting in the way of that a lot of times. Um, and so that for me is the biggest challenge. I mean, there's some logistical challenges too of just, um, how do you showing hospitality as an introverted person, that's going to look differently. Um, and just making, sure you have clear things. But I also think I think about things from an introvert's perspective a lot of times too. And so I think it makes more people, I think in a lot of ways, when you're showing hospitality as an introvert, you're thinking about all those little things and you're making it sometimes more comfortable for people who are in a similar situation um, to be because we can sit outside and I'm not gonna bombard you with 20 questions if you just want to sit there and sit by me and sit and enjoy the fire or even setting up the house or having different rooms or different things where just a couple people can sit down or different sitting areas and just like the things that I look for when I'm someplace that make me feel more comfortable. Um, Knowing those things allows me to, I think, host in that way too, of being more aware and cognizant of those things. So, yeah, the biggest challenge is just the
Yeah.
personal getting over that hump, uncomfortableness.
Well, I think we're going to come back. I want to put a pin in what you were just talking about because I think there are so many strengths that you and some of what you're getting at from an introvert's perspective bring to hospitality, bring to missional life. But I want to kind of like as you're talking about your challenges, you talked a little bit about how God calls us to uncomfortable things, and kind of what's undergirding some of what you're saying is this idea that it sounds like you're responding to God's call to be uncomfortable. So I would be fascinated, like do you have practices in your life that allow you to evaluate whether you're being uncomfortable, or do you feel like there's moments where you're allowing God to speak, like this is someone I need to get to know, or this is a situation I need to throw myself in rather than just being comfortable?
Hmm.
What is that? Where does that motivation come from, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think a lot of it is I just know when I'm just doing it because I'm so like, you feel that conviction of the spirit of just like, I need to do something or, somebody says something and you're like, yeah, I really should spend more time with them or I really need to do this. Or I start thinking about, somebody in my mind and I'm like, yeah, I really need to reach out to them or do something with them. Um, and I think that it's a lot of times it's what I do with my, um, like I get recharged by being by myself. And so I think what's important for me is that I'm actually using that time to actually do things that are going to recharge me
Hmm.
and not just numb me to whatever. So it's easy for me to just sit on the couch and watch TV. That's not recharging me. And so I think it's when I've spent my alone time well, then I don't need that alone time as much. I'm not craving that or desiring that.
Hmm.
I'm less likely to want to hide or just be by myself. And I'm more willing to be uncomfortable and engage in those conversations. Because when I had that alone time, I didn't just veg out on the couch. I was using it to actually recharge. And so I think that for me is one thing that I've noticed. And I would guess it's the same. Um, it's the flip for an extrovert. You have to use your time. you know, you're around people and to recharge, but you also need to like have that alone, that solitude to like reconnect in a different way. Just like I need to be around people, that's my uncomfortable time, because that also is shaping me and molding me. Um, and so I found I always feel like that's what, I love people. I think to love God is to love others, and to be around other people. And that is what we're called to do in this world. I'm much better at that, and I can do it much more easily when I've spent the time, my alone time, to recharge in the right way, to recharge that social meter. Um, because then a lot of, and I think it flows into hospitality as well. A lot of time, when I view, um, my life, or my house, the things I have is all just up for grabs. I want to give my life to God, whatever He wants to do with it. That's my body, that's my physicalness, that's my house, the space that I inhabit. Like none of these spaces are just for me alone. They are given to me to use for other people. And that's how we've always viewed it. Even when we've every house we've purchased, we've done it with the lens of, can we host people here? Is this living room big enough to have people gather here? Like that was always, a parameter in every single decision that we made, because we didn't want it to just be, if we were going to use our resources on something as big as a house, we wanted it to be something that was going to bless other people as well. And I think that's the same is true about myself in my time. If it's when I start to get thinking of it from a selfish standpoint of, um, this is what I want, this is what I think, but instead of like, this life I have is for God. I want to live for God, and it might make me uncomfortable, but that's what I'm called to do. I think it's when I'm viewing it more of that lens of everything I have is, I'm giving this all to God, my life and my property and everything else involved. That's really what allows me to go out and to be missional and show hospitality, and because it's flowing from that state. Hence why I tied it back to when I'm, spending that time to recharge and really connecting on a spiritual level. That allows me to. I think the times when there would be some people that would be like, I had no idea you were introverted. You seem so extroverted. Um, or when we're out at things, and it's because I think I'm just tapping into that, and I'm allowing God to use me in that way. And then I go home and I recharge and I stick my podcast AirPods in, and just spend some time in quiet. But
Nice.
yeah, so I don't know if that answered. I went all over the
No,
place
I
there,
think
but
that's exactly what I was hoping for, and I think that's really beautiful. I think for a lot of people, that symbiotic relationship, and I think understanding all the time, like we are holistic beings. There's a lot going on, and understanding like where my motivations are coming from, how do I change and begin to have healthy habits that help foster the best version of me. I think those are like really important decisions that we all have to make, regardless of our personality type or our strengths or our weaknesses, that allow God to use us the best. So, really cool to hear that. And I want to spin this because you hinted at it earlier. We want to make sure we come at this from the positive lens, obviously, not just a negative framework. Again, what we started out with is, despite what some people think, being missional, showing hospitality, is not just for go-getters or extroverts. And in fact, there's many weaknesses that go-getters and extroverts have when we think about some of these categories. And so when you think about when you think about what you've learned, where have you seen your strengths shine through? You referenced it a little bit, but I'd love it like us to work that out just a little bit more. Maybe where has your personality helped you in missional settings or shown hospitality? What have been the biggest aha moments for you along the way, where you realize like, actually, this is something that we're needed in. People like me have a lot to add, and these things that we're called to don't look complete for the church if folks like me aren't a part of it.
yeah. Um, I think for me personally, this is hard to think about, but I would say, is just that there's a deeper, I would say sometimes a deeper relationships. I've noticed it of just like willingness to have deeper conversations. I spend a lot as an introvert. I spend a lot of time in my head, and I'm an internal processor, and so um, I think being able to listen to others and then stay in the moment. I'm not typically thinking about like what I'm going to say next or what's going on late. Like I'm really trying to like focus and be present in the moment, and I think that that's a strength um, of mine. And then just listening and being able to have those deeper conversations. Some of my best friends, I've got some friends that are super extroverted and some friends that are really introverted. And my introverted friends are the ones that we have the deep conversations with. And my extroverted friends are the ones that I tend to have fun with. And I think for me, well, I like to have fun too. So hopefully I bring that as well as an introvert. But
Yeah, you have that.
um, yeah. So, but I think that the strength is being someone, um, and being a friend and being able to have, those deeper conversations, being a good listener. And then and specifically in hospitality is because I'm an introvert and I don't need to be around people. Like I think the strength is that I really genuinely enjoy like grilling or setting up because it allows me to like be doing something with my
Mhm.
hands instead of just be standing there trying to, forced to have a conversation. I'd much rather talk to someone while I'm grilling or while I'm setting up a table than while I'm just like standing there holding a drink trying to chit chat. I like doing something
Yeah.
is puts me at ease. And I think that the strength of that is that like we need those people to to do those behind the scene things. And I actually enjoy doing those things. Um, and then in inviting other people into that with you, I think is the big one. Not just saying I'm gonna go stand off in the corner and grill by myself, but like there's always somebody that's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go stand by the griller and see if they need anything or or just chat." And it's like I love that because I don't, we would always say all the time when I was training leaders of like, and this is probably stereotypes, but mostly a guy thing, but that girls do better when they're facing each other, but guys do best when they're side by side. And that's been my experience with
Wisdom there.
um any kids that I was trying to reach out with. But like when I'm doing something, some of my best conversations are when I have something else to be doing. And so I think as an introvert, that's really helped me try to um, unleash that because I'm not extroverted. I can't just like sit, I can, but I don't. I would. My preference would not just be to sit across the table. I think where I'm best is when I can be doing something else. I think I can help you move, or I can we're sitting there holding furniture, or I'm going to be helping you do something in the background. And like those tend to be where I have the best conversations. And so I think just recognizing that about myself and then putting myself in more of those kinds of or in a car ride and sitting next to someone in a car and having conversations there.
Yeah.
Um, those are the areas that I do really well in. So I think that knowing that those are my strengths is trying to put myself in situations where I can lean into those more. So it's not avoiding people, it's just making sure that when I'm with people, I'm
Yeah.
leveraging
Yeah.
that to the best that I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love, I think everything you're saying is really good. I mean, another thing I would add for you as someone who's got to do a lot of life with you the last few years, just to brag on you and Katie a little bit, is I think you're some of the most reliable people that I know. And, I think anybody who is a go-getter, an extrovert, it's not that I don't have deep relationships, I have plenty. But there's always a tendency to overextend how many relationships you can manage. And, you're got a lot of tabs open when it comes relationally. Bree sometimes is in awe how many texts I get from different people in a day. And I'm always like, my mind never stops like, has anyone checked in on that person? What about this person? What about that? And so I'm just constantly this barrage of relationships. And the downside of that is that sometimes because I'm overextended, I can't be as reliable when need arises. And on the flip side, like I can't think of almost any time someone has been in need since I've been your friend that you and Katie weren't there to walk through the hard stuff or be there to do the sucky thing. Um, we often refer on this podcast about being 2 a.m. friends, like that person that you can call at 2 a.m. and they're going to pick up, and no matter what's gone on or what's going on, they're going to be there to help you out. you and Katie have been that both for Bree and I, but also I've seen you be that way for so many other people. And so I think there is something to be said about like, you know, you know, there are moments where I'm mad at myself. I'm like, man, I wish I didn't have this many relationships to manage because I've got all this stuff on the calendar. This person has a need, and sometimes you can drop it all, but sometimes you can't. And so, I think maybe another strength that you often provide so often is you're the folks that do the hardest work of making a promise. You know, if someone's your people, they're your people. And I have never have a doubt that if someone calls or texts you, you're going to be the people to see it through.
Hmm. And we, just to piggyback on that a little bit, well, thank you. And also, yeah, like, we joke a lot, but my calendar is not full. There are open spaces, because I'm not planning like I said, like we have a few planned things, but the strength of that is it does allow you to, someone says something and we can be, yeah, we'll come to that, or we'll be there, or we can do that. And I think, um, recognizing that as a strength and not feeling bad that you're not doing as much, I think is a big for someone that's also, introverted, is knowing that having your calendar open means you are more available when someone needs something and you can be that person. And so, um, as long as you're still out there building those relationships. So,
Yeah. No, that's really beautiful. I want to kind of start to land the plane here a little bit, and have you just talk about what advice you would give other folks. So obviously, we know we're painting with a pretty broad brush here, and we know not all introverts are the same. Not every situation's the same. Not everyone has the same amount of resources, and so, you know, we just give a caveat here to this question. But what other advice would you give other folks who maybe they even clicked on this podcast episode because they're like, oh, I'm an introvert, I want to hear about this,
yeah.
who would categorize themselves as an introvert? What advice would you give them going on this journey, being a missional practitioner, maybe even eventually becoming a micro church leader in some capacity? And what do you think? What does the journey look like, so to speak? Where should they begin that journey
Mhm.
up towards health?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll start on the, not slightly negative side, but I think my first piece of advice would be is, don't hide behind. I think a lot of, um, I know it's my tendency, but a lot of introverts will hide behind like I'm introverted, so as an excuse to not engage or not be part of what God is doing in your neighborhood and the world. And so that my first piece of advice would be just to push past that and to know that that's not true. Hopefully you've heard that in this episode, that there are ways and God has a plan for you and can use you regardless. Don't hide behind your introvertedness as a excuse to not to get to know people, and to build those relationships. And then on the flip side is making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Um, well, being introverted means that being around people drains you. And so I think, the key is to make sure that when you are having that alone time, what are you doing that's going to set yourself up the best way possible that you can go back out and be around people, and bring, you know, God's love to the world around you. You know that that's going to be more draining for you than an extroverted friend. So let's make sure in the off times that we're doing what needs to be done, um, to make that feel less, or come from a place, more of a place of knowing your why too, of just knowing why I'm doing this, tapping into that, um, that God is the one sustaining me doing this. Um, and when you're doing it from like a not a sense of obligation or I have to do this, but from a sense of like I get to bring and be an instrument of God today in my neighborhood, and be attuned to where God is at. Um, and I do think in a general stereotype is that introverts are better listeners, and I think that that's a little bit, that's true to some extent. All stereotypes are true to some extent, but I think because of that, we can listen to more of where the Spirit's leading us, and you can be, someone you put your name on a heart, and just follow that instinct more of where the Spirit's leading you, and it might not look big and showy and flashy in a lot of people, but Maybe it's just that one neighbor across the street that you're just gonna, sit out with and chat for an extra 5 minutes today because you recognize something in them, or you're open and listening to the Spirit, or you remember something that someone said, and then you follow up with them, and you're consistent and reliable. I think those are the things that would be my advice: is to find your thing, to leverage where your strengths are. Every introvert is different, but to leverage, know what recharges you, leverage your strengths, put yourself in positions so that when you are around people, that you can be the best version of yourself, and give them a glimpse of God, um, and what that looks like, and that relational community, and make it as life-giving as you possibly can, in your context.
No, that's really good. And I think just to piggyback on what you're saying, hopefully, if you've never participated, we do have a kind of a fundamental cohort for us called our Practitioner Pathway. And one of the things we talk about is this idea of joining God. I think sometimes some of the fear that we all have when we start thinking about mission or micro churches, I'm going alone. I think sometimes we have this picture of the world's dark, the darkness, and I'm taking the light. Because I have Jesus or I have the Holy Spirit, I'm taking the light into the dark world. Scripture actually doesn't ever say that. It says, God, there is no place God's not already present. He's already doing work, wooing people to himself long before we show up. And so we should maybe feel a little bit of freedom to take a deep breath. It's not all on our shoulders. God's already showing up, and we want to recognize his presence. And like what you're saying, anything that can help us identify that. We have a cohort to give you some language and maybe some practices and some tools in your tool belt. But I'm with you. I think some of the deepest, most beautiful practitioners I know are a little bit quieter, maybe aren't as outgoing or flamboyant, but they seem to just be so deeply connected to the Spirit's movement and seem to recognize God's work in ways that sometimes I even miss. So I think that's really beautiful. If you've never partaken that cohort, would definitely encourage you to think about signing up on our website for a future iteration of it. And then also, obviously, this is why we do microchurch. I think if nothing else, you hear what we're talking about. I think you can hear Jace and I talk back and forth about the way that we've sometimes worked together. And we think this is why, when a community of believers together are a tangible presence of the good news in a specific place together, with all of their different skill sets, with all of their different personality types, that the kaleidoscope of that is way more powerful than going alone. And so how do we begin to bring community, join community, whatever works best for us, where we can begin to enter the missional, hospitable life together and not by ourselves, I think is so, so wonderful. And feels like there's so oftentimes I can think of moments in the last 7.5 or 8 years that I'm like, man, I'm so glad Jace and Katie were around, because I would have totally butchered this or overlooked this or not done a very good job in this had I not had people who were strong where I'm weak. And I hope everyone feels vice versa. So, yeah. Any last thoughts before we are done?
Yeah, well, something you said just made me think too, just like, I think God wants us all and is using us all, and I think that the other beautiful thing, and some of this is personality too, but is you're going to reach different people, and there's some people that have a magnetic personality, and there's a lot of people drawn to them, but there is a subset of people that are not going to be drawn to them, and maybe an introverted personality is more in lines of what their interests are and what they want to do, and you're going to connect with people. I've connected with people that Drew would never connect with, and vice versa. And I think that it does take the community, and just knowing that I might not have as many of those people as Drew does, like he said, but I'm going to connect with different people than he would connect with, and it's why we need everybody, because we're all different facets of the same God. We're all made image bearers. We all are projecting different images, and I think when we live into that is when we collectively as a community is when we are truly giving the world a glimpse of who God is, and playing into that and reaching people, that we can only do together, in our unique way.
So beautiful. Well, Jace, thanks for being on this podcast. And I think so much of what you said is just, again, lines exactly what we want. So practical, I think so real for so many folks, hopefully something good that they can take away from it. I want to thank everyone else for joining us on this episode, and we can't wait to continue this podcast journey with you and walk through the realities of following God in the everyday. In fact, we have another really awesome interview that is lining up. I think in our very next episode, you're not going to want to miss as well, but someone who went through our cohort, and God is doing some really, really cool things through them. If you want to find out more about the Renaissance Network, from our micro churches to future cohorts,
See ya.